Welcome back to Britain Politics now. Former Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt has been appointed Britain's Finance Minister following Kwasi Kwarteng's resignation from the post after less than 6 weeks in the job. A former Foreign Minister, Hunt has twice been unsuccessful in running for the governing Conservative Party's leadership, once losing to Boris Johnson and then being knocked out in the first round of voting in a contest which saw Truss take the prize. Seen as on the centre-right of the party, Hunt endorsed Truss's leadership rival, former Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, to become Prime Minister, and is seen by many in the party as a safe pair of hands. Hunt, who has also previously served as Health Minister and Culture Minister, becomes Britain's fourth Finance Minister in as many months. So a bit more of what happened today in the UK government. British Prime Minister Liz Truss fired her Finance Minister Kwasi Kwarteng and also scrapped parts of their economic package in a desperate bid to stay in power and survive the markets and political turmoil gripping the country. Ms. Truss, in power for only 37 days, told a news conference that she would now allow a key business levy to rise from next year. This is raising £18 billion, as she accepted she had gone further and faster than markets had been expecting. Kwarteng said he had resigned at Truss's request after being forced to rush back to London overnight from IMF meetings in Washington. Truss appointed Jeremy Hunt, a former Foreign and Health Secretary, to replace him. She won the Conservative Party leadership last month by promising vast tax cuts, deregulation, to try to shock the economy out of years of stagnant growth, and the fiscal policy Kwarteng announced September 23 aimed to deliver that vision.
I met the former Chancellor earlier today. I was incredibly sorry to lose him. He is a great friend, and he shares my vision to set this country on the path to growth. Today, I have asked Jeremy Hunt to become the new Chancellor. He's one of the most experienced and widely respected government ministers and parliamentarians, and he shares my convictions and ambitions for our country. He will deliver the medium-term fiscal plan at the end of this month. He will see through the support we are providing to help families and businesses, including our energy price guarantee that's protecting people from higher energy bills this winter. And he will drive our mission to go for growth, including taking forward the supply-side reforms that our country needs. But it is clear that parts of our mini-budget went further and faster than markets were expecting. So the way we are delivering our mission right now has to change. We need to act now to reassure the markets of our fiscal discipline. I have therefore decided to keep the increase in corporation tax that was planned by the previous government. This will raise £18 billion per year. It will act as a down payment on our full medium-term fiscal plan, which will be accompanied by a forecast from the independent OBR.
Our London correspondent Simon Pusey joins me now for more. Hello, Simon. It's another U-turn, but this time a U-turn on the Chief Financial Minister. Was this a surprise?
I don't think it was a massive surprise. I think over the last few hours and days, we've been thinking that there was going to be a U-turn. We thought it was probably going to be more policy-based, but then late last night, early this morning, there were rumblings coming out of the Conservative Party and lots of briefings that Kwasi Kwarteng was going to be sacked. It's rumoured that he found out about it on Twitter. He was in the US and had to come back early for a meeting with the Prime Minister. And I'm sure it wouldn't have been something that he'd wanted to have done. Of course, this wasn't just his policy. There was also Liz Truss's policy. He was going by what she had in her leadership contest manifesto. These were the rules that she was set out to distinguish herself from Rishi Sunak. So I think it was not a surprise that he's been sacked. I think it will be a surprise if Liz Truss manages to cling on a little longer, given these are her policies. And she still stands by them, but she's got rid of her Chancellor.
Indeed, but will his exit be enough to save her with all that's going on?
I mean, it remains to be seen. She needs to turn it around fast, and Jeremy Hunt needs to get off to a really good start for that to happen, really, because at the moment, by the sounds of it, a lot of Conservative MPs are calling for her resignation already, to be honest. Quite a powerful group are lobbying for her to resign. I don't know how they do that, whether they have to go to the 1922 committee and put all of their letters in, like they did with Boris Johnson. But it looked really hard for her, and that performance that we're seeing there was pretty wooden. You know, it was pretty scripted, it was pretty flat, there wasn't much charisma there. She sounded pretty defeated, and it makes no real sense to sack your Chancellor based on policies that you've both come up with, and then said you're going to stick with 90% of those policies, but you're going to have another Chancellor. So it does just look like she's sort of thrown him under the bus to save her own job. So I personally don't think she can survive much longer if things continue in the same vein that they are.
And one wonders what the major takeaways from her speech today was, and this is, you know, apart from announcing Kwarteng's leaving, she talked about the business levy rising from next year, and then raising £18 billion, and saying that she, you know, has gone further and faster than even markets were expecting.
I mean, that was the previous government's policy, was to increase the business tax, corporation tax. So she's just reversed, you know, what she and Kwasi Kwarteng had put in place. So there's nothing really new there. They'd already U-turned, obviously, on the 45% tax rate. So there's not really a lot here. You know, they've changed, really. She's rolled back on a few things because, you know, like she said, the pound plunged to record lows. But this is too little too late, I think, for most people. She had to do this, and I think she's only doing it to try and cling on to power. But like I said, if Jeremy Hunt can somehow pull things together, he is a very senior member of the party. He's held big jobs before. He's gone for the Prime Minister's position before and not got it. He's well respected in the party. But, you know, he's never had a Treasury job. He's never been Chancellor. So let's see what he can do and whether he can sort of pull the iron out of the fire and somehow change the fortunes in terms of finance for the party.
And finally, what's been the Labour Party's reaction?
Well, I think one of incredulity. David Miliband, who was Ed Miliband, sorry, not his brother David. He was taking on David Cameron in an election in 2015, and David Cameron came out with this now infamous line: "You can get strength and stability with the Conservatives, or chaos and uncertainty with the Labour Party." And he's tweeted a clown emoji next to that, a line that was tweeted in 2015 by David Cameron, just saying, well, look what you've got now. I think the Labour Party don't really need to say much at the moment. I mean, Sir Keir Starmer has come out and said, you know, this is insanity. The Liberal Democrats are calling for a general election. I don't think they're going to get that, because the only people who can call a general election at the moment are Conservatives, and they would be absolutely trounced. So I don't think there's a chance of that. I think there's probably more of a chance that we're going to see another Conservative Prime Minister than we're going to see a general election. Things looking very good for Rishi Sunak at the moment. Of course, he predicted a lot of this would come true. But I think Labour are basically sitting back and enjoying this, really. Because, you know, what more could they want? They've got a 25-point lead in some polls, lead in the polls, and they're just sort of sitting and waiting to take office, really. And I think some Conservatives actually think it would be better if Labour did take office now, because I think it's just got quite embarrassing being sort of thrown around like this, and they just want it sort of to be over, I think. So, yeah, the Labour Party are really enjoying it, and Sir Keir Starmer is doing the rounds right now, doing lots of interviews talking about just how extraordinary this is. We've had 4 chancellors in less than 4 months. Even in UK politics, that's extraordinary. So I think they'll be loving every second of this, the Labour Party.
Simon, lots to watch out for in the coming days. Thank you. Our London correspondent, Simon Pusey, there live for us. Well, away from politics, but still in Britain, climate activists have thrown tins of what appears to be tomato soup over painting of Van Gogh of sunflowers at the National Gallery in London. Footage showed 2 people in just Stop Oil T-shirts opening tins and throwing the contents on the masterpiece before gluing their hands to the wall. The Metropolitan Police said 2 people had been arrested. The gallery said the painting was covered by glass and therefore not damaged. A statement from the Trafalgar Square venue said that just after 11 a.m. this morning, 2 people entered room 43 of the National Gallery. The pair appeared to glue themselves to the wall adjacent to Van Gogh's Sunflowers 1888. They also threw a red substance, what appears to be tomato soup, over the painting. There is some minor damage to the frame, but the painting is unharmed. And to France, where the CGT union, at the core of a weeks-long strike at oil major Total Energies, have walked away from wage talks Thursday night, dashing hopes for an end to a standoff that has disrupted everyday life as petrol stations run dry. A few hours later, the more moderate CFDT and CFECG's union, representing a majority of workers, struck a deal with Total Energies, which, if approved by union members, would mean a 7% pay rise and a bonus payment. The CGT seeking to use the refinery's workers' protests as a starting point for nationwide industrial action across sectors, which could hamper parts of the country's infrastructure this autumn. Strikes are already underway at some of EDF's nuclear reactors and union branches, including in the railway and automotive sectors, announced they would take part in a wider strike planned for next Tuesday. Well, viewers, Henry Bridgewell joins me now. Hi, Henry. You're joining me from London. First, let's start with where you are. Lots of things happening. First, let me ask you your calculation to Liz Truss's position as Prime Minister with her sacking of Kwarteng.
Well, it would seem very precarious at the moment, despite the fact that she is only barely a month into her premiership in Britain. She's had to fire her Chancellor, who flew back last night from the IMF meeting in the United States to be welcomed back to London with the news that he had lost his job. I think the problem for Liz Truss is that she was very closely tied to this policy, and what she has tried to do to ensure her survival is to fire the Chancellor and essentially try to pin that policy on him, those policies of tax cuts, unfunded tax cuts that economists say left a £60 billion black hole in the British economy, to try to pin that policy on him and to move on. But the problem was, of course, that during the leadership campaign in the summer, she very much proposed those policies. She was very closely tied to them, and she formulated them alongside the Chancellor. Her own MPs are even questioning her position now, so I think the next few days is going to be very difficult indeed for her.
And Henry, with that situation, you know, in Britain, the crisis of the economy, is that what France might be going through with these protests?
Well, there are similarities across Europe and around the world, and your viewers will be all too aware of as well of the cost of living crisis that is a global problem. And to be fair to Liz Truss and to Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, you know, their powers to limit the impact of global inflation caused in part by the war in Ukraine and those soaring energy prices is limited. So to that extent, yes, the similarities are there between the economic problems that are going on. But I think that's probably where the similarities end. Of course, Britain has its own problems with the fallout from Brexit and from its own political problems. It's had 5 prime ministers in 10 years. In France, of course, the political situation is more stable. Emmanuel Macron is in his 2nd term. But this is the first big challenge to his 2nd term in France. And critics say the government was just too slow to pick up on the impact that these strikes would have, in that it has led very quickly to petrol shortages at the pumps that are impacting on everyday consumers, but also on things like school transport, on agriculture, on fishing, particularly in the north of the country where the impact is being felt the most. And so the government is going to have to try to get a grip on this very quickly if it's going to avoid political impact for Macron.
But what would you say the major cause of the protest is? I know you've mentioned, the cost of living, rising inflation. What exactly? What will the workers, what do they want so that they can stop the strike?
Well, of course, France is partly famous, you might say, for the willingness of its workers to strike, to use their collective bargaining power to get better working conditions and pay. And I think the driving force behind these strikes is the perceived injustice that these oil companies have secured huge profits on the back of rising oil prices this year. Total has, in the first 6 months of 2022, had $10 billion of profit. ExxonMobil, which until this week was part of the strikes as well, had $18 billion of profit in the first 6 months of this year. And its workers say that that money shouldn't just be going into the coffers of the company and into shareholders' pockets. It should be shared with the workers as well, who are struggling with inflation that is nearing 8 or 9% in France. And I think they have widespread public support in that as well. And so it's that injustice. The workers and the strikers say it's not that the money isn't there. It's not as if the economy is so bad that they can't afford pay rises. The company has the money, they say, so they should pay it to the workers. What the companies and the government say is different. The government says it's not in a position to negotiate directly with the companies themselves, and it expects the companies by themselves to give more of the profits, give more of the money to the workers. But in the last few days, we have seen a harder line from the government directly saying to the companies now that you should share these massive profits with the workers, essentially instructing them to go back to the negotiating table to try to end these strikes. But as you said in your introduction, the unions themselves aren't unified around one position. A couple of the unions want to accept the pay offer that Total has given of 7%, but the harder line CGT union wants to continue striking, continue pushing for 10%. And this is growing as well into more of a political movement as well. On Sunday, there is a protest planned in many cities by left-wing political groups. And I think on the back of these strikes, the participation will probably grow. And then there is a much bigger strike plan for next Tuesday, not only involving the oil workers, the refinery workers, but other workers as well in transport and other sectors. So the unions will feel they have some momentum behind them, and the government is trying to strike the balance between the companies and the workers, trying to keep France, as they see it, as an attractive place to invest, but also trying to keep the petrol stations supplied with petrol.
We can imagine how this continued protest will indeed affect other sectors. Well, we want to appreciate you. Thank you, VOA's correspondent Terry Bridgewell, joining us from London. Thanks again.
Thanks very much.
And the EU interior ministers are meeting in Luxembourg to discuss migrants travelling across Serbia and other Balkan states to the European Union 2 weeks after Hungary, Serbia and Austria pledged new measures to reduce numbers. EU Home Affairs Commissioner says the recent increase in migrants from Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Central Asia and Middle Eastern countries is concerning. The Serbian authorities say hundreds of migrants are entering the country daily from Bulgaria, North Macedonia, while others from countries like India, Tunisia, Cuba and Burundi are crossing borders using visa-free regimes introduced years ago.
We have seen a significant increase of migrants coming through the Western Balkans route, and not at least we see also those traveling visa-free to Western Balkan partners that come also into the European Union. And this is, of course, something that we are concerned of. So what the Commission are doing and will do even more is to reach out to all the Western Balkan partners to assure that we will have a visa alignment so that the visa-free traveling that causes some of those flows will stop. We will step up when it comes to Frontex, but there also need the support of member states to deploy people.
The UN's World Food Programme, WFP, says Haiti is facing a humanitarian catastrophe as it struggles with malnutrition, gang violence, inflation, and a cholera outbreak. According to the WFP, some 4.7 million people, almost half the population, are facing hunger, with about 19,000 people in the Port-au-Prince neighborhood of Cité-Soleil facing catastrophic hunger. Haitian gangs have, for a month, prevented the distribution of diesel, gasoline, crippling businesses and hospitals, creating shortages of basic goods, including water, just as the country is struggling with a new outbreak of cholera. Another UN official added that 100,000 children in Haiti under the age of 5 were suffering from severe malnourishment, adding that they are especially vulnerable to the cholera outbreak.
Haiti is facing a humanitarian catastrophe. The food security situation in Haiti is getting worse. The report that's being released today, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Report, shows that the severity and the extent of food insecurity in Haiti is getting worse. The report says that according to the numbers we have, 4.7 million people in Haiti are facing acute food insecurity. 1.8 million of them are facing emergency levels of food insecurity. 6 months ago, we had lower numbers. We're seeing an increase of 200,000 people in acute food insecurity and an increase of 500,000 people for emergency levels of food insecurity. One of the highlights, unfortunately, highlights isn't the right word, but one of the key points of this report is that for the first time in Haiti, and I believe this is the first time in the Americas, there are people classified as phase 5. This is the worst classification in the 5-point scale we use to rate food insecurity. So this is phase 5 catastrophe. The appearance of this population in phase 5 in Cité-Soleil is a warning to us all that the situation in Haiti is getting a lot worse and that urgent action is needed for many different reasons. We've got in Cité-Soleil 20% of children affected by global acute malnutrition. Food consumption indicators show that over half of the population isn't getting enough to eat. And there are access constraints in these areas.
The U.S. House of Representatives Committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol have voted to subpoena Donald Trump, former president, an action that could eventually result in his imprisonment if he does not comply. Republican Rep. Liz Cheney asked the panel's Democratic chairman, Representative Benny Thompson, for a committee vote. The House Select Committee's 7 Democratic and 2 Republican members voted 9-0 in favor of issuing a subpoena for Trump to provide documents and testimony under oath in connection with the January 6th attack. The vote came after the committee spent more than 2 hours making its case via statements from members, documents, recorded testimony that Trump planned to deny his 2020 election defeat in advance, failed to call off the thousands of supporters who stormed the Capitol, and follow through with his false claims the election was stolen.
But our duty today is to our country and our children and our Constitution. We are obligated to seek answers directly from the man who set this all in motion. And every American is entitled to those answers, so we can act now to protect our republic. So this afternoon, I am offering this resolution that the committee direct the chairman to issue a subpoena for relevant documents and testimony under oath from Donald John Trump in connection with the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. If there's no further debate, the question is on agreeing to the resolution. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed is no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Well, Maria Bird, our Washington correspondent, joins us now for more. Hi, Maria. So, former president been legally compelled to testify before Congress about his, role in what happened at the Capitol Hill January 6 last year. Was this a surprise, and is it an indictment?
You're exactly correct. This is not a surprise. I think that this was something that has been long awaited. If you look at what's been happening over the past few months with the hearings and the January 6th, just kind of going through the actual actions that happened on that day, it was very likely and expected that this day would come where the former president would be subpoenaed. And as you stated, it was a unanimous vote. Even Republicans voted for him to be subpoenaed, to come in, to bring any documents that they requested, and also to appear. And so I think this is going to definitely be first in American history, number one. But also this will be a day of reckoning as it relates to the future of American democracy and how the democratic process is ensuring that these type of events are not one that could be incited or potentially encouraged by the president. So that is what they are hoping to come to some sort of enlightenment around, whether or not the former president had anything to do with, and if he was involved in this attack on the U.S. democracy.
And he can appeal the subpoena. What's his reaction been since the announcement?
He's not surprised. I mean, we all know that former President Trump is very vocal and very much has been against this hearing the whole time. And so, he will continue that same stance moving forward. The question is, if he does appeal this, will that stand? And if the court order will sustain with the subpoena, it is highly likely that he will be required to come forth to the hearing and also to provide any documents they request. And so that is highly likely. I don't think that we're going to be in a situation where that appeal will obviously stick, but potentially the appeal could elongate the process and cause a further delay in him being brought forth to the hearings.
In terms of the list of committee, what's the makeup like? Because we know the Democrats and Republicans are sort of divided on this issue involving the former president.
The committee is majority Democratic. There are some Republicans, but remember, even the Republican Party today is divided. You think about some Republicans that are what people might consider the traditionalists of the Republican Party, compared to those who have even been considered, and our current president has called the MAGA Party of the Republican Party. And so that is showing even division within the Republican Party. Now, those who obviously are supporters of former President Trump typically are engaged with the MAGA party, and those are the Republicans that obviously are vehemently against this hearing and against obviously the subpoenaing of the former president.
How would this affect the midterm elections next month?
This could have a major impact. And, obviously we've seen that there are some individuals that have been supported by former President Trump that have won the Republican nomination for the various states across the country. And so if the individuals that are supporting them that find information out through these hearings, through the testimony by the former president, that could potentially cause them either to not come out and vote if they are hardcore Republicans, or they could end up voting for the Democrats.
Finally, Maria, how much time do they have, appeal, cross-appeal, before they conclude on this matter?
Well, I think many people were thinking this was going to conclude way before the midterm elections, but we could be looking to a few more months. But as you stated, if former President Trump does appeal, then we could be in a position where this does drag out a bit further. But I think that is going to really be dependent upon how quickly they can get him to testify. And I think once he testifies, we will see a very quick conclusion to this process.
Maria, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Maria Bird, our Washington, D.C. correspondent, joining us there. Over in North Carolina, 5 people, including an off-duty police officer, have been killed in Raleigh, prompting a massive manhunt that shut down parts of the city and resulted in the arrest of 1 suspect. According to a police spokesperson, 2 people were wounded and taken to hospital for treatment. The shooting broke out just after 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time near the Nueces River Greenway, a trail that runs through part of the city.
This is a sad and tragic day for the city of Raleigh. Just after 5 p.m. today, multiple people were shot on the Nueces River Greenway near Hedingham subdivision. There is currently an active investigation. At this time, what we can report is that RPD has confirmed 5 fatalities. One of them was an off-duty Raleigh police officer. 2 others were also transported to the hospital. One is a Raleigh police canine officer. Thankfully, he did not have life-threatening injuries. At about 8 p.m., Raleigh police reported that they had a suspect contained in a residence in the area. Raleigh police are being assisted by numerous local and state law enforcement agencies. I would like to thank Governor Cooper for his swift action in assisting us and providing us resources that we needed. And I'd like to thank him for his support during this very difficult time. All of us in Raleigh right now need to come together. We need to support those in our community who have suffered a terrible loss, a loss of a loved one. We need to support the family of the police officer who was killed and also the police officer who was shot.
Regardez le poireau, vous voyez? Ce poireau et la coque, je vais les retirer.
And finally on the program, a fancy restaurant on the first floor of the Eiffel Tower may not be the obvious place for climate action, but Michelin-starred chef Thierry Max wants to make it a showcase for a local and climate-friendly cuisine, offering seasonal and local ingredients cooked with minimal use of energy. His Madame Brasserie restaurant gives diners a spectacular view over Paris and an inkling of how the restaurant industry can dress a greener table. Putting the finishing touches on a starter of leeks as his team gets ready for the evening service, Max said his entire menu is designed to minimize the restaurant's carbon footprint. Max, who won his first Michelin star in 1998, runs several restaurants and is a national celebrity due to his participation in TV cooking shows, said that from its opening in June, the entire restaurant had been designed to save water and energy. 20 years ago, a restaurant such as this would have been blazing hot ahead of the evening service with all the hobs and the ovens on. Climate friendly. Well, that's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Melissa Toroga. Bye for now.